Hi everyone, Storm Anderson here, and today we are going to be diving into a series all related around responsive Canvas app development. And so as a part of the first video for that series, we're going to talk about how to build, I think, a nifty little feature, which is a flex table that can not only display really a few more capabilities than what the data table, the current out-of-the-box data table can do, but it can also go that much farther in actually being able to adjust to the screen size, really giving us that responsive capability. So you can see here, if I minimize my window a little bit, that we have a basic app layout here, nothing too fancy, a little bit of a header, a filter, a new request button, and then we have our table. Some features that you'll notice are the clickable headers. We don't have necessarily these programmed just yet, but these are able to be distinguished from each. And we also have this click handler hover effect for each row. So as I click the row, you can see that it responds. And then third, we have this little nifty capability where we're identifying conditional formatting for a certain column. In this case, if the assigned field is not set, we're calling out the background and even changing the language that's displayed. So this is the app we're going to be covering today, so let's just jump right in. So I'm going to switch over to my Canvas app editor, and so this is a little more focused on the Canvas app editor out of the browser, not so much Dataverse for Teams, though there are similar layout features and functionality that you'll find there as well. But as we start, we're going to have a blank canvas. This is just screen one, nothing has been changed yet. The first thing we're going to do is change the setting, which is scale to fit. So if I go to display, and you'll see that here, scale to fit, as well as lock aspect ratio, we're going to turn these off. So when I come back to my app, nothing necessarily looks too different, but if I if I play the app first, you'll see one that I have this little different browser. This gives me the option to change between the window size, canvas size. This is now letting the app start to be aware of its screen size. That's essentially what this is now starting to give us. We don't have anything on the app just yet, so let's start building. So I'm going to start not so much from a blank slate, but instead I'm going to use some of the Flex container capabilities from the templates that are here. So across the top, new screen, we have these different options. I'm going to choose header, main section, footer. So I'll get screen 2. I'm actually just going to get rid of this first screen just to have a clean slate. And so now I'm going to rename my screen the request screen. And this first container, I'm going to name the main container. Two things to call out is how all of this responsiveness is driven is based on some of these references where you can see here for the main container, the width is sent to parent.width, aka this is now reflecting to the screen. And then same thing for height, we can see that that's parent.height. The items within the main container are what represent the header, the main section, the footer. I'm just going to rename these a little bit just for my own convenience. Nav container. This I'm going to call the body container. And footer container, that's fine. I'll just get rid of the 1. So we don't have anything in here just yet, so let's start adding some of these features that we had in our demo. So I'm going to add an image here first. You'll notice some of the default settings we need to start to override a little bit. This is where Flex container development can take a little time to get used to, but as you start to get more acclimated to it, it really is great for tackling almost any feature. But a key approach is that we do need to use that parent.height, parent.width reference wherever we can. So in this case, since the nav container is fixed, we want the items within it to also be fixed to that height. We could make this static. If this is also static, right, you could kind of put that into the image 1 height as well. But this way we can keep everything much more tightly coupled, which makes sure that it's all behaving how we want it to. Let's go add a few more items. So the header, we'll program that in a second. We also had another image for the profile, and then we had another text for the profile name. I'm going to rename these. This is going to be our logo image. Rename. This is going to be the header text. This is going to be the profile image and profile name. All right. So let's upload an image. You can kind of pick anyone for yourself, of course. In this case, I'm going to use our little icon. And then I'll just set that once it's uploaded. There we go. You'll notice these other items are still kind of floating in the abyss, and so we do need to set them to that height dynamically. A quick way we can start to kind of group things together is I can hit Control and then click each of these, or I could hit Control A and that'll select all the items. When we start to work with these containers, they really give us additional features such as understanding that these are all items within the same level of this hierarchy. So Control A actually knows that that's selecting everything at that level. If I did nav container, you can see that that does Control A. It'll auto select the items at that level as well. So what I'm going to do is go to the height property for all of them. And if I put parent.height, you can now see that all of those are set automatically to that value. So this is just a quick way to kind of bulk update certain components. I'm going to rename this, or rather put the text here, so flex table demo. Let's make that a little bigger, semi-bold. There we go. And let's just fill the rest of these out before we start adjusting them. For the image for the profile, we're going to hook into the user reference. That is the user function, if you will. So user parenthesis, parenthesis, and then image, and then same thing for here. Except now we're going to use the full name. All right, so we're not quite there from how this is looking, right? This still had some spacing. This is pushed over to the side. So now we're going to start to selectively turn on flex for the components that we want to. And so this we all want pushed over to the right-hand side. So we can turn on flex just for this header. And then in that case, since this is a horizontal container, it'd be flexible width. We can see that it now pushes everything over. And the reason for that is because it's flexible, it's now trying to adjust to whatever is in the screen, whereas the rest of these items will stay put as however they are set. So just to show that, now I can play the screen and we can see that that's pushed. If I have this shortened, you can see that it's a little better, but there is some adjustments here that we want to make. So a formula that we're going to use, and this is very handy for hooking into the responsiveness, is using the app active screen size to control mobile/desktop logic. And so in that case, let's go to visible here. And this is going to be for the profile name component. And we are going to say app active screen is greater than or equal to. In this case, we want to show this only when it is a tablet or a desktop. So in that case, you use greater than 2. All of this is controlled through this app size breakpoints. And you can see here 6, 900, 1200. If we were to think of this in the spaces in between these values, anything below 600 is going to be 1, 600 to 900 is 2, 900 to 1200 is 3, and then anything above 1200 is 4. So with this logic saying show this, make the visible true, if active screen size is greater than 2, that is essentially saying if it is greater than 600 to 900, aka if it is 900 or above, then we're going to show it. And I can prove that, so let's just maybe take this out for just a moment. Or actually, let's keep it and we'll just add to it. So flex table demo, and then we're going to concatenate app width. And so that's the width. Let's add one more thing for reference. And we're going to say app active screen dot size. And this is just for demoing and showing you that this is valid. So now if I play the app 1366 and 4, if I minimize it, 444 and 1. So those breakpoints were 6, 9, and 12. So if I start to make this a little bigger, I'm approaching 600. There we go. It changes to 2. If we go up to 900, changes to 3. And of course, 1200, now it's 4. So this is our logic. And as you can see, if I make it small again, now the name disappears. All right, almost done. Let's just add a little feature here. So this is just a nifty little trick where if we have a profile photo, or rather just a photo that we want to make more of like a circle, just like myself here, we can change the border radius to be half of whatever the height width is. So in this case, 37.5. Now we'll make this a circle. All right, so moving into the next section, we can see that when we think of flex, you really need to think of the hierarchy. So we just did the nav container. Now everything within this gray area is the body container. So let's switch over to working on the body container now. All right, so we're going to come into the body. And so just to give us that distinction of what is the body, what is the nav, let's just change the colors here. So I can make the background fill gray really at any point. So let's just make it the screen. We'll make that this light gray. And then for the nav container, another convenience here is that we can control the background fill of these. So if I go to fill, and let's just change this to color.white. And now we can see that that's standing out. If I did want to add a separator, just to give us a little more kind of color distinction between the areas, I can add a rectangle. This actually got added outside of the container, so let's delete that. And so I need to make sure to select the main container, rectangle, and now you can see it's behaving with the rest of these items. I'm going to reorder this to bring this up. And again, we don't want this to be flexible. It's already turned off, but the height here is just really too large. So I'm going to set this to 3. And now we kind of have just that basic little distinction separator. So now coming into the body again, we're going to start to add these 3 different sections, which is 1, the top level here, which is kind of this table filter panel, if you will. We have the table header, and then we have the gallery or the table itself. So the body container, let's add a few more flex containers in here. So 1 horizontal container, this will be the table filter panel. Click on body container again, then we will say horizontal container. This will be the table header container. And then the gallery doesn't need to be in a container, but let's just add it in there now for holding space. This will just be a blank vertical gallery, and that'll be there. All right, so to fill these pieces in this first section, we needed to add the combo box and the button. So let's just add those through the input, or rather, let's do a drop down. And then the second one, a button. So those are in the top left. So if we want to change those, we can go to its container, the parent container of those items, and change the justify and align. So I'm going to make it justify end and align end, aka vertical bottom or horizontal right. There's a little bit of, essentially there's no spacing here, so we can change the gap. Again, make sure you're on the parent container, and then these are the settings that will apply to its children. So I'll put 10 there. Now you can see those are separated. Last but not least, let's just add a little bit of padding just to give some spacing. Let's just put it on all 4, top, bottom, left, and right. There we go. So if we want to adjust this a little bit, let's see what this looks like here in mobile. Looks fine on desktop, but if I shrink this, you can see that it starts to get cut off. In order to configure these, we don't want them again to be flexible because otherwise they might be going all over the place. But let's just make these a little bit smaller. So this would be something like 160. And the values here, we're not programming just yet, but we can think of these as active, inactive, things of that sort. And this will be the new request button. Finally, let's just make this table filter panel just a little smaller so it's not taking up so much space. We do have flexible height turned on. We can turn that off. And then I'm just going to make this something more around 80. Actually, let's make it 100. There we go. So now moving to the header for the table. So how this works, first turn off flex, and then let's set the height to something a little thinner, like height 50. And so all of these are just buttons at the end of the day that are holding space for a column representation. So how we can do that is let's just add the buttons. And so I'm going to program this first one just so that I can copy and paste it rather than adding and reprogramming each one. There's only just a few adjustments we need to make. Height will be parent.height. Let's make sure to turn off the border radius. The flexible width This will be managed in just a second. Right now it's just taking up all the space. That's fine. And let's just rename this to then table column header. All right, so let's just copy this, Control C, and if we paste, thankfully we will stay within the table header container. So I'm just going to paste 6 of these. All right, so in order to set these, now is where our data source will come in. I just have a simple list here in SharePoint called project requests. It just has a few basic fields: title, request details, assigned, due date, and request type. And then since it is SharePoint, it's also managing a created and modified. So in my demo, I have the title, request type, created, assigned, due date, and then modified. So I'm just going to manually type these in. Next one was created. And when I'm double clicking these, it's just going to the text property. So I'll select the button, text property, and then this one is assigned. This one is due date. And this one is modified. All right, so we can see that these are all now taking appropriate space and are just set up how we want them to for now. So the next part is getting into the gallery so that we can have these all behave the same way. So I'm going to connect my app to my SharePoint data. And here's my SharePoint connector. And then my dev environment, project requests. And then now, so for my gallery, gallery 1, let's rename this to request table. So the gallery request table, we're going to now set to the project request. If that drop-down doesn't appear for you, all we did was go to the data source and select the project request here for the gallery. We don't have any fields in it yet, so there's a few things we just want to adjust. Since we are making this look like a table, the template size comes out of the box with this formula that Microsoft provides. We're just going to get rid of all that, and we're just going to set this to a consistent 45. As well, the template padding, this is something that we can adjust, but for now we're just going to leave it to 5. This is what adds the spacing around each individual row, just giving it a little bit of a pop-out effect. There's a third setting related to the template. I always find it easier just to go directly to it in the property dropdown. That is template fill. And so here, I actually want to make this color white just so that it stands out a little bit. And you can see that that's already appearing for the 2 rows. So now that we have just the basic of the template set up, now we can go ahead and edit gallery. Make sure now we're in the card or the template for the gallery, and we're going to enter another flex container. And this one is going to be horizontal, just like we did for the table filter panel. Let's make sure the XY coordinates are 0, 0. And then for this, you would think would be parent.width, but since we're inside the gallery, we actually need to reference the gallery's parent, or rather in this case, parent.template width. That way, that template width, or the template padding that I was talking about that's here, if we don't take into account template width, it will just take up the whole width of the gallery, disregarding some of the structure that's based on the template itself. And then same thing for the height property of the internal flex container. We're going to say parent.template height. All right, and now this is taking the whole space. Now we can do the same thing we did up here for the table header container. Let's just rename this to table data container. And then let's just add our first text label. This will be table column data. Again, you don't have to follow this perfectly to some of the naming, just trying to give us something more distinguished. So I need to make the height here, just to go through these steps again, parent.height. Since we're now in this flex container and not just in the gallery, we do switch back now to parent.height. So just might be a little frustrating at first just thinking of the differences of this, but this is now based on the parent, which is just a normal flex container. I'm going to set this one first to this item.title, just to give us the basis. Let's turn on the flexible width. And now let's go ahead and copy this in. So again, table column data, I'm going to Control C. You can also right click and copy. And then you can select table data container and then paste. 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and so now that we're taking up the correct amount of space for each one of these, let's just go through each of these. So this is our request type dot value. This one is the created field. This one is our assigned dot display name. And so just to bring in that little bit of conditional effect, we're going to say if is blank this item assigned display name, then we're going to, if it's blank, put in our own string value and say not assigned. Otherwise, display this item assigned display name. Moving on through due date and modified. All right, so now that we have the values of the gallery in place, let's just double check a few more things. We need to bring in the conditional formatting here, and we also have the click handler that's giving us this hover effect. The other thing to think about is as we minimize this, notice that the headers actually disappear. So we are hiding them just like we hid the profile name. We can hide the headers and then provide something else. In this case, just a simple label saying existing requests. We also need to change the dynamicism of how those values are displaying from displaying horizontally to displaying vertically. So if I switch back over to our app and if I hit play, you can see that these are still staying in place. We need to make those adjust, and then this as well we need to adjust. All right, so let's tackle the smaller items inside the gallery first. So I'm going to come to the assigned. Let's go to the fill property there. And so what we're going to put here is if is blank this item dot assign display name. If it's blank, we are going to make it this light red. And so if you had a different color, otherwise I'll just use this one. Make sure that the alpha value is low, just in this case, so that it's not, you always could have it more distinguished, but just this makes it a little bit easier to see on the eye, I always thought. Otherwise, if it's not blank, then let's just make it transparent. All right, so we have that. Now to add the little click effect, the hover effect that's happening on the row, what that is actually through a web development technique where you would have the A tag or what holds a link be kind of grabbing or holding everything inside of it. We kind of take the same approach, just a little bit differently, but outside of the flex, we're just going to go to the request table itself, edit, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a button. And so you can see it's overlapping, which is what we wanted to do. Let's call this the table click handler. And so we're going to position it just kind of the same way. So the X coordinate is 0, Y 0. The width is going to be parent template width, right? Because now we're back inside the gallery, not the flex. And the height as well, parent template height. So now it just looks like we have a big giant button overlaying everything, but we're going to adjust that a little bit. So the text, let's remove. The fill, we are going to make transparent, which gets us there halfway, but now the hover fill property of the button is actually still too solid. So we can't hook into the hover fill to make the background of like the gallery template fill or make the background of this change, unfortunately, but we can still provide a similar effect from a UI standpoint using the hover fill. So when the user hovers over this button, this is the property that controls that. And color fade is just a fancy way of making this dark color a little bit darker at the end of the day. But we don't need to change any of that. We're just going to change the opacity here to 0.2. And now you can see that it's giving us that hover effect. If I play rather than just holding Alt, you can see. There is this border radius that drives me a little nuts, so I'm going to take that off of the button. And that just cleans that up a little bit more. The final thing is if the user clicks it, it's still making it all disappear. So let's just change that through not the hover, but rather the pressed. oops, I need to make sure I'm on the button. And then same thing, rather than hover fill, we're going to pressed fill. And it's pointing to the color. That's not really what we want. Instead, let's make it go to the self.hoverfill. And just to make it stand out a little bit, let's reuse that color fade. But instead of making it darker, let's just make it lighter. And so now if I play, there's the darker, I click, and now you can see it changes a little lighter. Again, it's all about giving the person the UX of this understanding for their eye that, oh, I'm clicking something, I'm doing something. It's so valuable for helping people pick up on their own how to interact with something. All right, so now that I have all of my gallery pieces in place, let's make some of this change based on the screen size. And so minimizing, I have everything showing. So let's first make these headers disappear. So rather than doing that per column header, I'm going to the header container. And for the visible, I'm going to say app active screen dot size, only show it when it's greater than 2, which means show only for desktop. All right, and if I play, minimize, boom, they disappear. I do need a label to take their place though, so I'm going to go to the body container. Let's insert a text label. That's towards the bottom. So label 5, for me, I'm just going to relabel this as the table mobile header. And I'm going to reorder that. I'm going to bring that up. It can be above or below the header container. Either way is fine here. It doesn't really matter in our situation. You can see that it's not stretching all the way. So to make it stretch, we can either make the width parent.width, which is what we've done for some of the other items. The other option is to make it aligning container and make it stretch. And so now that we've made it stretch, let's just make the background of this stand out a little bit. This is going to be darker. Let's make the color white. Let's maybe make it size 14. And we'll keep it normal. Finally, let's just put the text there. So this is going to be existing requests. The only other piece is to make its visibility based on the screen size. So app active screen size, only show when less than 3, show only for mobile. And if I play, you can see that it's not displaying, it's just the headers. I minimize, and now there's our label taking its place. Now let's make the adjustments to the gallery. So for the gallery, we can make that, one, we need to make a few items disappear. So we just kind of arbitrarily chose title will display, request type will display, but we don't need the created value to display. So I'm going to hide that. App active screen size is greater than 2. I'm just going to copy this function and I'm going to go over to my other 2 values that I know I'm missing. Now notice if you do add the click handler, sometimes people get a little confused by this. That will click only on the click handler because it's sitting in front of everything. So to get to the due date value, in my case, I do need to go to the tree view to make sure I'm getting to that. So now I can go to the visible property and paste in my app active screen size greater than 2. Last, let's go to modified in the same way. Visible property, app active screen size is greater than 2. Now they were still all displaying in a horizontal format, so we do need to adjust the row to actually display more things in a vertical fashion. All of that's being restricted though by this property, which is the template size. So you guessed it, we have to make the template size now adaptable to mobile versus the desktop. So if app active screen size is greater than 2, aka this is desktop, right? Then we want it to take that same amount of space, which is just a table row. Otherwise, we can pick a more fancier approach to determining what it should look like in the mobile format. I'm just going to make space for 3 items. We're almost there, but if you notice, now it's just making these wider, or rather taller. They're still sitting next to each other. Doesn't look too bad, but we still have some issues now because this text is still being squeezed. It's not just really an ideal layout for the mobile approach. So I'm going to need to adjust not only what the the gallery's template size is, but I need this now flex container, our table data container. We're going to need the direction of that to change from horizontal to vertical. And so this is controlled through this property, the layout direction.horizontal. So if I make my logic here, app active screen dot size is greater than 2, this is of course again desktop. I'm going to make it horizontal. Otherwise I can type out that layout direction, and this is going to now be the vertical. Let's play. And we're so close. We can see that the hover functionality is staying with the whole app, but this fill is acting a little goofy, right? This should be stretching across the whole screen. And so what that's controlled by is that width property that's on each of these. And so the final little trick here is when we are trying to set these, the minimum width is what is being driven based on the fact that this is a horizontal flex. But the minimum width is not taking into account when this is a vertical, because when this is a vertical, then it's looking at flexible height, therefore it's looking at what's the minimum height. So in order to make these stretch for the full width of the gallery when it's in mobile, I know that's a mouthful, then we want to set the width property, not the minimum width property. And so here we will say if app active screen size is greater than 2, we'll keep it to 150. Otherwise, we want to parent.width. And if I play, now you can see that's taking the full screen. All right, and so what we've been able to accomplish here, there's a few more things that we can adjust, but the core concepts are that one, we've been able to bring in app active screen size to really make our application that much more dynamic and responsive. It can show things for mobile, it can hide things for desktop, and everything in between based on your imagination. Also, going above what a data table can do out of the box, we're also now bringing in conditional formatting. We're bringing in much more capability around if we did want to make sort capable buttons here, we could hook that up. All of this makes the whole table much more functional based on what we want to do, rather than being limited to what the out-of-the-box options have. So what's next is we will be working on a modal capability that will pop up above this and really show then the new request form. I hope you enjoyed.